first of all, what's your full name?
Lester Schrenk.
And your birth date is what?
November 16th, 1923.
Where were you born?
A little town by the name of Long Prairie, Minnesota.
Okay. How far is that from here? We're in Bloomington, Minnesota right now.
It's about 125 miles northwest of here.
Okay.
I was born on a dairy farm.
What was it like growing up there? And
I hated the farm. I'm glad I grew up on a farm because I think a person got to know how to do just about anything.
Yeah. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I had a brother and a sister. Unfortunately, both of them passed away.
Okay. And so where were you, I guess, when World War I started, for the United States anyway?
World War I or World War II?
Thank you for catching me.
We had just sat down to eat our noon meal, and we had only had a radio, of course, at that time, and my mother's face just turned white when she heard the news because she knew that sooner or later my brother and I would be involved.
At that time, you were, how old were you?
I enlisted on my 19th birthday, so I must have been 18.
18, yeah, sounds about right. Okay. And on your 19th birthday, yeah, you enlisted. What about your brother? Did he?
My brother was drafted about almost a year ahead of me.
Okay.
And he served in the South Pacific.
Okay. And so when you enlisted, can you kind of walk me through where you went for training and?
I enlisted and inducted at Fort Snelling, Minnesota. They sent me to Kearns, Utah for my basic training. Then they sent me to Wichita Falls, Shepherd Field for mechanical training. Then they sent me to, what's the name, Tyndall Field, Florida, for my now I can't even think what you call it, gunnery training.
Yeah.
Then to Alexandria Air Force for my flight training. And then, of course, overseas.
Now, what unit were you in?
92nd Bomb Group, 327th Bomb Squadron, 8th Air Force.
And you were, what position on?
I was a ball turret gunner.
Ball turret gunner, okay. And how many missions did you make?
We were shot down on our 10th bombing mission.
Okay. Now, I've seen your documentary that was made in Denmark, right?
Part of it was made in Denmark, part was made in Heidelberg, Germany.
Yeah, and so I know some of this, but I'm going to ask some of the same things that you shared on those. But where were you based when you got to
Paddington, England.
Paddington. Okay. Paddington.
P-O-D-I-N-G-T-O-N, Paddington.
Gotcha. And were you with your usual crew at that point?
Yes. I always flew with the crew. Unfortunately, our bombardier did not, and on that mission he was shot down, so we had a substitute bombardier.
Okay. And most of your missions were, where were your targets at that time? This was in 44, right?
Most of them were in Germany. There were a couple of them in France, and the one we were shot down on was in Denmark.
Okay. Kind of walk me through the that last mission, and from, I guess, from briefing in the morning, getting ready, and
Well, when we were briefed, we were told that we would be going on a mission to Denmark, and we were elated because Germany just did not defend some of the other countries that were not Germany nearly as much as what they defended their home state of Germany. But then we found out that it was a diversionary raid. There would only be about, I think it was about 25 or 30 airplanes sent as the decoy.
separate from yours? Or?
Well, the main Air Force went to the Ruhr to bomb the Ruhr Valley, and we were sent up to Denmark to try to lure the Luftwaffe away from the main targets.
I see.
But I don't think it worked one bit.
And so, how far or how long of a flight before you encountered some trouble?
I think the minute we hit the coast of Denmark, we picked up some flak, and later on, a few fighters, but the main Luftwaffe really attacked us after we left the target.
Okay. So,
we were well over the North Sea by that time.
And what altitude? Probably.
I would judge 19,000, 20,000 feet.
Okay.
That would have been about the usual.
So what were you seeing from your position in the ball turret?
Well, I saw a plane just off to our right hit and crash into the sea, and I knew right away there were no survivors. And just a few minutes later, I heard a loud explosion in our own airplane, and I looked out and I noticed that the the number 4 engine was trailing a big plume of fire about 30 feet long.
Yeah.
And then I heard the pilot call the navigator and asked him where the nearest land was, and the navigator come back and said 20 minutes due east. So in other words, we had 20 minutes before we could expect landfall. And there was one explosion after another, so severe that it would completely blow the flame out, but then it would re-erupt, and then there'd be another explosion. And I don't think any of us ever thought that we'd ever make landfall. But
20 minutes was probably...
20 minutes was a long time to wait, yes. But it was also to my advantage because I called the pilot and asked permission to leave the turret, which I think saved my life, because exiting a turret when you're shot down is nearly impossible. There's so many things that you have to do, and time, of course, is so short.
Yeah.
But just as soon as we hit land, there was one final explosion, and the right wingtip blew off. And we all bailed out, but unfortunately, I found out later, my pilot was killed because he landed in a lake with thin ice. broke through the ice. There were some Danish people that tried to rescue him, but the Germans prevented it. They let him drown.
Oh. That's a shame.
Yes, it is. He was a very, very nice guy, a friend to everybody.
What was his name?
William R. Levy's from Birmingham, Alabama.
Really?
Yep. He had just graduated from the University of Birmingham.
Wow.
He was 23 years old. He was the oldest of the crew. We always called him the old man.
Oh, and the name of your plane, the nickname of your plane was
what? Pot of Gold. It was named after a radio show called Pot of Gold, where they gave away prizes. That's where the gold part came from.
Okay. How was it? Was it easy for you to get out of the plane, or what part of the plane did you?
I jumped out of the waist door opening.
Okay.
And the guy ahead of me froze, and I gave him a big kick in the rear, so he got out of my way, and I jumped next. I was the second person out. Out of the rear. I don't know about the front, because the other half of the crew went out of the front of the airplane.
Okay. And so after you landed, were you injured at all?
Well, first of all, when I pulled the ripcord, the chute didn't deploy, and I found out that it had stuck, and I ripped it open, and the drogue chute came out, but that was a little bit scary.
Oh, you had to use the reserve?
We had no reserve.
Oh.
It's just that the drogue chute had stuck in the covering.
Oh, so it didn't deploy at all?
Didn't deploy at all.
Hold it open.
That's right.
And kind of throw it out?
Yep.
I gotcha. Whew. Well, that's one thing after another. And
well, that isn't doing it.
And then, so it did open eventually. You landed. And
you landed like a ton of brick, because our chutes were very, very small, much, much, much smaller than the paratroopers use.
So you're falling a little fast.
When we were in training, they told us that it was the equivalent of jumping off of a two-story building. And I don't think they exaggerated that one bit.
Right. And were you injured on the landing at all?
Just sore muscles and everything for the next couple of days. None of us broke any bones, but it was quite common for people to break bones when they hit.
Yeah. Were you captured right away? Or?
They had a semicircle around me even before I touched the ground.
Wow.
So I had absolutely no chance of doing anything.
So what did they do then?
Grabbed my arms and threw me in the back of a car and took me to their headquarters.
And they gathered the other crewmen together other than the pilot?
The navigator wasn't captured right away, and he managed to evade capture for about a day or two, but he had nothing to eat. It was wintertime, and he finally got disgusted and just gave himself up. So when we were captured, there were 8 of us.
And where did they take you first?
Well, they kept us overnight and then put us on a train. It was a 2-day trip to Dulag Luft, which is a suburb of Frankfurt.
Okay. You just kind of walk me through the whole process from there. what you experienced, or can remember it.
The first place they give from the time you were captured to the time you got to Gulag Luft, you got absolutely nothing to eat at all. So you were very much starved. And then they took us to interrogation. Interrogation was dreadful. It was a great big room of all prisoners that had just been captured. And you were in that room, and you could hear the sounds of beatings, men crying out in pain, sounds of being hit with various objects, even gunshots at times. And you were in that room for maybe hours waiting for your turn to be interrogated. When they took somebody in for interrogation, that's the last you saw them. They never brought them back. So you had no idea what happened to them. And when it came for my time for interrogation, I can still see the guy. If Hollywood would have picked him, they couldn't have done a better job. The first thing you notice, he only had a stub of arm, right arm. He carried what we call the burp gun, which is kind of the equivalent of what am I trying to say now? Submachine gun, anyway.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you notice, he had a great big scar right across, so deep that he was missing one arm. And he would take the rifle gun barrel, put it in your back, and he would prod which way he wanted you to go. He never said a word. He took me to this room with this German officer, and of course I gave him my best salute and stated my name, rank, and serial number. And the German officer, I said, like he was my best friend. Oh, here, have a cigarette. You must be thankful to be alive. I notice you're not hurt too badly. Would you like to have us inform your mother and father that you're alive and well?
It was all perfect English?
Perfect English. And of course, you certainly wanted your mother and father to know that you were alive. So you said, yes, sir, I would. Oh, we do that through the Red Cross. Here, fill out these forms. So you look at the form and the name, rank, and serial number, and then it went on to all kind of military stuff. So I filled out the name, rank, and serial number and handed it back to him. Dummkopf, don't you know? Don't you think we know that you were flying at a B-17? Write it down. And of course, I get my name, rank, and serial number again, and then he started slapping me and hitting me, and the German guard punching me in the back with the gun barrel, and he'd keep on asking more and more and more questions, which I refused to answer by giving over my name, rank, and serial number. By the time he was done, he was just absolutely worked into a lather. And then he finally said, unless you write down what we ask you, we're going to send you to the Gestapo. And of course, the Gestapo at that time was known for their torture, where they'd take a pliers and pull out your fingernails and take a hammer and hammer one finger at a time and things like that. And I still refused to answer. Then he said, he put the gun barrel right to my head. And he said, unless you answer the next question, you know what will happen. And then I, of course, remembered the rifle shots. And I was thinking, this is the end. I again gave him my name, rank, and serial number. And then I felt the German guard behind me give me a big boot in the rear where I flew out the door. And I knew the interrogation had ended. But was that ever a scary ordeal. And I found out later that if you gave even the least little bit of information, they would have beaten you to a pulp trying to get more information from you.
Next.
They kept us overnight, and I think that's the first first thing we got to eat. It was a thin slice of bread spread with something, a kind of a jelly, and I found out later on it was a jelly made out of beets. It tasted like heaven because we were so hungry. They had taken our shoes and stockings away from us, and they made us march through the snow to the railway station. And the people along the way were jeering at us, throwing objects at us. One woman, I actually didn't see it happen, but I understand it happened a little while after we were away. Another contingent of prisoners of war, one of the people pushed one of the guys right ahead of a speeding locomotive, and he was killed. But to be in a place like that and just have everybody just cursing at you and throwing things at you and spitting at you is another ordeal you'll never forget.
Yeah. How do you deal with it?
How do you deal with it minute by minute?
You weren't in the same prison camp or Stalag the whole time, right?
No, they sent us to Stalag Luft 6 first. And that was Heidekrug, East Prussia, is where the camp was located. It was a 4-day journey from Frankfurt to Stalag Luft 6. And during that time, the only thing we got to eat, they stopped the locomotive and had, to me it tasted like dried peas that had been ground into a powder, and they stopped and mixed it with water from the locomotive, and that was the meal we got, if you can call it a meal. It was a miserable trip.
Was it all walking or
No. 4-day by rail.
By rail, okay. And how long were you? Do you remember? Were at Stalag Luft 6? How long?
We got there about March the 1st, and we were there until about July 1st, when the Russians were nearing the camp. We could hear gunfire, cannon fire for several days before they evacuated the camp. And we were hoping the Russians would liberate us, but we had no such luck. They rounded us all up.
Did you know that was who it was?
Oh, certainly would know who it was. Oh, yes.
And so they rounded you up to go.
Marched us to a railway station and started to load us into boxcars. When the boxcar wouldn't hold anymore, they would bayonet the people, the prisoners in the doorway, so that they would make more room for a couple more. And it was absolutely so jammed that they couldn't get any more, and they slammed the door shut. This is the middle of July, and of course you've got no food, no water. And we were in that boxcar until well after dark before it started moving. And the next morning we found ourselves in Memel, Lithuania, and they loaded us on board two great big, they have been used for hauling coal. And they put us down in the hold. And there again, there were so many, we were crowded so close together, you couldn't even sit down. You spent 4.5 days standing upright. Absolutely nothing to eat. They did lower a bucket with water, and I did manage to get a little bit of a drink, but that bucket was the same bucket that they used to lower for us to relieve ourselves in. So, but by that time, of course, you were so desperate for water that you would drink anything. And I managed to get one little tiny sip during that 4.5 days. And of course, nothing to eat.
I don't know how you make it.
Will to live is quite strong, you know. And I never did have any idea that I wouldn't make it. I had promised my mother when I enlisted that I would be back. When we got to our destination, they loaded us into boxcars and shackled us in twos by our wrists. And we spent a miserable night on a boxcar going to Stalag Luft 4. But it was such a relief not to be on that coal ship any longer. And when we got there, I can still remember there was a little red-headed captain, German captain, and he said, "Today is your lucky day. Today you don't only get one Red Cross parcel, but you get two." And good heavens, 2 Red Cross parcels? I hadn't even got a full one ever. Anyway, sure enough, they handed out 2 Red Cross parcels each. Then I heard the German captain say, "Affix bayonets," and then charge. And they started running us down the road to Stalag Luft 4, which was, I think it was about 5 kilometers away, running us with dogs and bayonets, being shackled in two. And of course, most of the guys, in fact, just about everybody dropped at least one parcel. I was so desperate, I managed to hang on to both parcels, and I think I was about the only one that did. And then they had us lay out in this meadow, and of course we were so desperate for water and food, and the German guards, there was a pump nearby, they would pump water, throw it at us, do everything except give us water. And we waited there for, I think, a half a day when they took us through what they called the strip search, where you had to remove all your clothing and everything, and they were actually looking for a hidden radio, which they knew somebody had. But anyway, when I saw the German guard that was going to conduct my search, I just cringed, because he was one of the worst guards that we had. He was the type that would come up and take his rifle butt and stamp it down on your arch, trying to break your arches. Or he would come from behind you and slap you against the ear with his open palm, trying to break your eardrums. And when I confronted him, the first thing he did was grab both my Red Cross parcels, tried to take them away from me. Of course, I wouldn't let him. I kept on repeating it. I could speak German. I kept on repeating that there were Red Cross parcels, and therefore they were mine. And he took out his pistol, and every time I tried to keep him taking him, he would hit me across the head. The 5 times he tried to take the parcel away from me, and 5 times he hit me across the head or across the chin, to the point where I'd sink to the floor. I'd regain myself, and the last time I realized that it was no use trying to keep him from taking the parcel, because if he would have kept on, I'm sure he would have killed me. So at last I let him take the parcels. The minute he turned his back to me, I grabbed my belongings and bolted out of the door. Quickly lay down in between some of the guys that were already searched and pretended I was asleep. And I saw him come out with pistol in hand, swearing in German, looking for me. And he went back and forth about 4 or 5 times, just inches from me, and didn't recognize me, so I was safe.
Wow.
And that's how come I've got a lot of the things, a lot of the poems that we had written in Stalag 6, I have them to this day as a souvenir.
Wow, wow, wow. And how long were you there?
We arrived there about the middle of July, and it was the 6th of February when they again evacuated the camp. And they told us to be ready for a 2-day walk, which turned out to be 86 days. And the German death march was horrible. It was just 4 or 5 days at a time. You got absolutely nothing to eat. You slept out in the snow. You had one blanket. I froze both my feet and my hands numerous times, and not to the point of losing fingers or anything, but severe frostbite, which plagued me to this day. I've always got cold feet anytime the weather gets even the least little bit cold. But I think I'm very lucky, because that's one of the few things that bother me to this day. For years and years, I was suffering from dysentery, and my stomach was giving me a problem. It took the medical people forever to find out what was wrong, but during my attacks, they would find that my stomach was actually above my diaphragm, and locked both ways where food couldn't get either way. They operated on me and put my stomach in a mesh bag and tied it to my backbone. And that's where it is today. And that is mostly taken care of it. It does bother a little bit once in a while, but never to the point where it used to. So I think I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, you sure are. Can you describe more on the that 86-day march? You were telling me earlier a few things.
We were so weak from not having anything to eat, like I mentioned, for days at a time. You have absolutely nothing to eat. Even in Stalag Luft 4, I'll have to describe what they give us to eat for a while. It came in a tin can, no label or anything, and we think what it was the residue of codfish after the livers after they extracted the oil. It was a great paste, and what made it so bad was this is summertime. The German guards would run their bayonets through it, leave it lay out in the sun for a couple of days, and then give it to you. And when you get it, the place where the bayonets had entered was just a foaming mass, and it had the smell of rotten fish, and of course the taste of rotten fish. You had two choices: either eat it or starve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they fed us for about 2 months.
Mm.
So and like a lot of times they would give you soup, so-called soup. What it was made out of clover, boiled clover. That was your meal. And I don't mean the blossoms. I mean just the clover, the way it came from,
Yeah.
bugs and everything.
There's not much there either.
Yeah. On the march, if you got the equivalent of one potato, but I have to explain how the potato was done. The Germans cooked potatoes for their pigs. When you stayed at a place, that's exactly what they did. They put the potatoes in this cooker. They were always way overcooked, where they were just absolute mush. And of course, the potatoes had been scooped in there right out of the field, so they had a good amount of dirt on them. And if you got the potato from the bottom of the vat, it was more dirt than what it was potato.
Yeah, there's minerals in that, right?
Oh, well, you bet there were minerals in there. But some of the guys got so desperate from being hungry that they actually ate dirt, just plain dirt. You have no idea what it's like to have hunger pangs from the time you're captured to the time you're liberated.
I think you were telling me too a little bit about on the march. Obviously, everybody didn't make it through the march.
That's right. If you couldn't keep up, a German guard would stop back with the prisoner. You'd hear a gunshot, and the guard would again join the unit. You've never seen such heroism. Some of the guys that you'd hardly put one foot ahead of the other would literally carry their buddy on their back just so he wouldn't get shot, knowing fully well that they would never get a medal or anything, never be recognized for their deed. But those are the guys that really needed the medals, are the ones that sacrificed their own life for their friends.
Yeah. Where did the march end?
It ended in a little town called Boze, Germany, which is just east of Hamburg. And we were liberated by the English.
And how did that go down? What did you?
They were marching us every day, except one day the Germans gave word that we weren't going to march the next day. And we had no idea why. I mean, we were just elated because we didn't, we had one day of rest. We got up that morning and started marching as usual. And all of a sudden we saw a contingent of people coming from the other way carrying white flags.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got up, I was the interpreter for our group, and the German officer that I was interpreting for came up to me and he shook my hand and he says, "Now we're prisoners and you're free." It was just as sudden as that. I had no inkling it was going to happen or anything. And then we were told we had to drive. I think it was quite a distance. We would have had to march around 20-some kilometers. And my buddies and myself started marching down the road in the direction they said we'd have to go to get to the English outpost. And we ran into a bunch of dead German soldiers on the way. And to this day, I don't know why, as weak as I was, I picked up one of the rifles. And we kept on going, and we came to a farmhouse, and I saw a couple horses out in the yard. And I said to my friends, I said, stay here, I'm going to go and see if I can't get some kind of transportation that we don't have to walk anymore. And I rapped on the door, and this woman answered the door, and I told her I wanted to see the meister of the house. And oh, she pleaded with me, don't hurt me. I'm a slave laborer from Poland, and I assured her that we'd do her no harm whatsoever. And when the guy appeared, I told him, I said, I see some horses on your yard, and we have to go to such and such a town. And I said, we are not walking there, we're using your horses. Oh, he pled with me, please don't take my horses, they're lame. And I said, we're taking your horses. Then he pleaded with me, he says, what if I give you a ride in my tractor and wagon? I said, that'll be just fine. So they had what they called tractors, but what they really were, they were a one-cylinder outfit that they used for transportation. They didn't really use them like we use our tractors, but they were one cylinder, and he had up a glow plug with a blowtorch first, and then they would crank it with the flywheel, but every once in a while it would start backwards. It would run just as well forward as backwards, and if that happened, they'd have to shut it off and start all over again. Anyway, he readied the tractor, and I told all my buddies to get in. And along the way, I made him pick up every straggler that along the way. And when we got to the outpost, I thanked him, and I said, now you can return to your home.
I forgot to ask this. Do you know how many men or prisoners were on this march, approximately?
About 6,000.
Wow.
But we were all in small groups. They had divided us all into groups of about 250, 300 each. So we weren't all together.
Do you know how many survived that march?
Even the U.S. government doesn't know.
So it would be hard to keep up.
Yeah. Because there were so many people that were killed when they bailed out and everything. And the German farmers would, in fact, if you bailed out and a German farmer caught you, he would kill you with a pitchfork, bury you, and that was the end of it. So even our own government doesn't have no idea. Because there's a good many of them, I'm sure, even to this day, buried out in the woods somewhere, nobody has any idea where they're at.
So when you reached the, I guess it was the British outpost, after they took you on their wagon, what happened then?
The English treated us like kings. They took real good care of us. They gave us their uniforms to wear, and then they kept on telling us, we've notified the Americans, and they should be here any day now to come to pick you up. For some reason, nobody came to pick us up, and the English got so desperate for food. Most people don't realize this, but the English were rationed to 2 meals a day. Even the military soldiers had 2 meals a day instead of 3 like we did. And there were more of us prisoners than what there were English, so we were eating them out of house and home. And at last, sheer desperation, they called in the Royal Air Force and literally dumped us at the nearest U.S. base. when they dumped it at the U.S. base, the Americans said, "We don't know what we're going to do with you. We got no place for you at all. You're just going to have to go out and find any place for you to sleep because we haven't got any bedding, anything." So my buddies and I found a bombed out hotel, and of course it had no coverings or anything. We slept on the floor with no blankets, no nothing. And it was colder than hell because it was still early spring.
Yeah.
But for some reason, our own government it treated us just like dirt. And that's one thing I still resent today. They took us to Camp Lucky Strike. We were confined to a tent. There were four people in a tent, and we slept on canvas cots. All we had was the things that the English gave us, so we froze our butts off. There was no heat or anything in the tent. We had no blankets. Like I said, we haven't any provision for you at all. And we were confined to that tent. They would wake you up like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "It's your time to eat." Of course, the food was very good, but our stomach were in such a condition that the minute you'd eat anything, you'd feel real full. An hour later, you'd feel real hungry. Mm-hmm. So again, we were just absolutely miserable. And we still had our English uniforms on because they had given us none. And what really irritated us, that the German POWs that were working on the camp all had American uniforms. We didn't. Wow. So, I mean, that was just another irritant. One day, airplane landed, the American airplane landed, and I said to the guys, I'm going to see if I can't get the heck out of here. And I walked up to the pilot and I said, "Sir, you don't happen to be flying back to England, do you?" And he says, "As a matter of fact," he says, "yes, I am." And I said, "Can I hitch a ride back with you?" And he looked at me, and of course, I'm in the English uniform, and he figures that I'm on my way back home. He said, "Well, yes, you can," but he says, "Are all your papers in order?" I said, "Yes, sir, they sure are." I didn't have a single thing. And then he says, "Well, meet me back here." And he says, "I think I can give you a ride back." That's the way I got back home, was hitchhiking my way back home.
Was it just you?
Just me. Well, after I was in England, I had a girlfriend there, so I was hanging out at the Red Cross, and within about 3-4 days, all kinds of guys, my buddies, and all of a sudden showed up. They all did the same thing I did. And we were there for maybe a week or two. And we figured, well, this can't go on forever. We're going to have to turn ourselves in sooner or later. So we decided if we all go together and all turn ourselves in at one time, there isn't much they can do. If we go individually, they'll throw the book at us. And of course, we went there and they gave us holy hell. And we're sending you to Southampton here, confined to the barracks. They sent us to Southampton. We'd post one guy at the barracks, and all the rest of us would be in town having beer. So that's the way it ended.
I like your ingenuity. That's what you need, that to make it through.
I got by with it.
Yeah. Wow. Phew. So you got back to England
in June.
June of 45?
Yep. But I didn't get home till, well, that must have been late June, because I didn't get home till July 28th of 45.
Okay.
And of course, we'd been liberated May 2nd.
Wow.
So, I mean, they weren't in any hurry to get us home.
They weren't.
So then, they sent us home for recuperation, and supposed to report in San Antonio. This is in October, and believe it or not, I wanted to re-enlist. They took one look at me and said, "You're too skinny." They wouldn't let me re-enlist. My discharge today reads discharge for the convenience of the government, because I didn't weigh enough.
Wow.
Wonder why I didn't weigh enough.
I wonder how much weight you lost through all that. You know?
I can't tell you exactly, but when I was shot down, I weighed 185 pounds. Several days after we were liberated, and I mean this is about a week or so after, I weighed 93 pounds.
You lost half your weight.
Yeah, just about half.
Years later, you were able to go back and make a return and visit your crash site, for one, in Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a very interesting reunion with a particular German. So when was it you went back to Denmark?
In the year 2004.
And what did you want to do there?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. I got my first computer in around the year 2000, and there was a website called d24.net, and I was monkeying around with that, and I ran into two gentlemen that were talking about the air raid of the day we shot down. And I excused myself and told them that I was very interested in that. I had been one of the crew members on that mission. And of course, that just lit them up. And the one fellow said that he would try to put me in touch with the Danish farmer where our plane crashed. And of course, that put me on the right track. And soon, this man, his name is Niels Muller, was the son of the person that had been on that farm when our plane crashed, and he was very interested in corresponding with me. So we were emailing back and forth, and of course, he invited my wife and myself for a visit. And when we got there, they treated us just like a king. They even had, his brother had a lake cabin, and they let us use the whole lake cabin. And the guy that owned the lake cabin wasn't there when we got there, but I still remember we came in and there was a note on the table that said, "We hope you enjoy our hospitality. Whatever food or drink you find, consider it yours. Use anything that you wish," which I thought was very, very nice of him. And they had metal detectors, and they took us out in the field where the airplane had crashed, and we found all kind of artifacts, including the identification from our airplane, and also one of the control handles from my ball turret.
Yeah. So this,
It's mounted on wood right now, but it's bad. It's very badly bent. It used to be covered with rubber, and even it had a little rubber across the trigger.
Yeah.
This is where I would have maneuvered the turret. I would have had one in both hands.
Mhm.
And when I wanted to fire the guns, I would have depressed this lever to fire the guns.
That is so cool. Amazing that you found that.
Yes, it is. They tell me that the school kids had projects of finding wreckage from various crashes, and school kids had scoured that same property a number of years, and yet we go there and find two of the main things that we were interested in, one being the ID plate from the airplane, and the other, of course, being one of my control handles.
Yeah.
Hold that this is the ID plate, and you can see it's badly burned, but you can still very much see there was a B-17G, and you can see the serial number very, very plainly.
Thank you.
There was a film crew there that recorded the whole event, and then at one of the meals there, I had mentioned that when we were first captured, that I thought it was the German pilot that came to look us over. I found out later I was wrong, but I said even at that time I would have liked to have talked to the German pilot. And one of the relatives that was there says, "I'll help you find him." And he is the one that actually spent 4.5 years searching for the German pilot. He was told many times that he had died a number of years before, but that didn't deter him one bit for trying to find the pilot. And I guess in Germany they have their former people very well guarded, where just ordinary persons can't locate somebody. But he was using the excuse that he had an American friend that wanted to put flowers on his grave for saving his life. And that he finally persuaded one German to give him a little bit more information of where he could find the pilot. And when he called, of course, he still thought the pilot was dead. This woman answered the phone, and he again told her that he had an American friend that wanted to put flowers on her husband's grave because during the war he had saved his life. And the woman says, "What do you mean on my husband's grave? He's sitting right alongside of me." Oh, I found out later that the German that broke down and gave him the information he needed got fired from his job. Unfortunately.
Well, I'm glad you were able to find him.
I was too, because he turned out to be a very, very nice person. I contacted him. We exchanged several emails, and he finally wrote me a very nice letter saying that if I had the opportunity, he would like to meet me.
Yeah.
Then somehow the same company that did the recording of the crash site got involved, contacted me and said they would pay our way if they could film us meeting the German pilot.
Yeah.
So we got a nice free vacation, 100% paid.
Very good. And so in 2012,
That was in 2012.
you went to Heidelberg.
Yes.
To meet, what's his name?
Hans Hermann Müller.
Could he speak English?
He could speak German, English just as plain. And I found out that he had worked for NATO, and that's where he learned his English. Okay. He had flown for NATO for a number of years.
But you could speak German as well.
Oh, certainly.
And how is it that you knew German? I meant to ask you that before. But.
My great-great-grandparents came from Germany.
Okay.
My grandparents mostly spoke German. The only problem was they both died. I think one of them died when I was 10 and the other one when I was 12. So, and then to make matters worse, we lived on a farm. They lived in the town. So the only time we'd get to see them is usually we'd go to church and then stop at their place for a little while. Of course, they did come out to the farm once in a while, but I mean, I had not that much contact with them. So, and then to make things even worse, so many things hadn't been invented or anything, so they would just substitute an English word when they were speaking German. But when I got captured, I learned that German very, very quickly.
I bet you did. So you went to Heidelberg, and what was it? Describe that first meeting with Mr. Muller.
They were at his daughter's house, and she had a mansion. I don't know. She must have been very well to do, but they were all very cordial and everything. Had a great big dinner for us, and it was a very, very nice. We had a very nice time.
Wet towels that were under there.
And then he later invited us to his place and showed us all his medals and everything, which I understand most Germans never do. But he made the exception for us.
What? Of course, you had communicated before you actually met face to face, but what was the mood there? Was there a little bit of nervousness, or were you?
I think right off the bat we were a little bit nervous to how the other one felt, but the minute we met each other, that completely disappeared. And like I said, we had a very, very wonderful time. He took us for a great big boat. Everything he did was prepaid. I mean, he wouldn't let us pay for a thing. He took us for a nice long boat ride, viewing the castles along the Neckar River, and also a tour of it's a great big castle that's right in the city of Heidelberg, and it was really very, very interesting, right up my alley.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And
oh, I wish I could show it to you. He even sent back a bottle of liqueur. It's called Goldwasser, in other words, gold water. There's gold leaf so thin that it actually is suspended in the liqueur.
really,
I mean, you have to shake the bottle, but it'll stay suspended for quite some time. I've never seen anything like it, but he sent that back with us.
And did he? I suppose he filled you in on his side of the story.
I was asking him. I said, when we were shot down, I said, I never even got to shoot at your plane. He says, no wonder. He says, you were in the ball turret on the bottom of the plane. He says, I made a shallow dive. He said, you never would have been able to see me.
And
so he remembered exactly where he was, exactly everything, right down to the minute of when we were shot down.
From what I remember watching the documentary, is he could have shot you down over.
Oh yes, he said. I asked him about that. He said He says, I saw your plane was crippled. He says, and you were out of the war. He says, why should I keep on shooting? He says, that is not a gentleman's way of doing it, is what he said.
And so he basically,
But most German pilots would have kept right on firing.
yeah.
He was very much the exception. In fact, a number of German pilots, if you were hanging there in your parachute, they would shoot you right, while you're in the air. So I think he was brought up right.
Yeah. So you were very, and you consider yourself very fortunate.
Exactly.
You could have died over the sea or in the
Yep.
sea.
That's where I get for saving my life. He actually saved my life by not continue to shoot.
Yeah.
That's the reason I wanted to thank him.
Yeah.
So many people say, well, did he apologize to you? Well, why should he apologize to me? I was trying to shoot him just as much as he was trying to shoot me. But like we also in that video, you notice both of us saying that you were not shooting at a person, you were shooting at an airplane.
Mm-hmm. Anything else related to that meeting that you wanted to share?
No, except several people from Denmark actually came to visit us, and so did his granddaughter, the German pilot's granddaughter. And of course, I'm still in touch with all of them,
Yeah.
except Hans Hermann, of course, who died, and he was 99 years old when he died. And I corresponded with him almost to the time of his death, except he suffered from a stroke and was incapacitated where I guess he couldn't speak English anymore for some reason. He forgot all his English, and he couldn't correspond anymore at all. But then shortly after that, he passed away.
Okay.
And that was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, we're so grateful for you sharing the story. First of all, you being able to make it through all of that. Not many people can say that. And to be able to reunite in such a way of, shows the forgiveness of the human heart. I don't think it doesn't sound like you ever held a grudge against him.
Oh, absolutely not against him, no.
But
you'll find that it's always better to have a friend than an enemy.
A friend.
Well, certainly.
What do you attribute your making it through the war to?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, come on, move over here.
Like I said, even the worst, I never had a doubt that I wouldn't make it through. And I think that also helps you get through. Because if you give up, you've weakened yourself.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie or read the book called Unbroken?
Yes.
About the guy in the Pacific. He was
Yes.
Louis Zamperini, I think is his name.
I can't remember all the details anymore, but I did read it. And it was a very good book.
It makes me think of that, the parallel there. You never give up.
Yeah.
Would you say there's any divine intervention in there involved? I don't know if you're a person of faith.
I've always believed in prayer. I've said a good many prayers, and I think just the fact that you believe that prayer will help is going to help. Have the faith.